I never pictured myself as the sort of bride who sends out embossed invitations and then scans the guest list for names to delete. But that's exactly who I became once I slid the final RSVP envelope across the kitchen table and saw the neat little family unit staring back at me in black ink. Mom, Dad, and my older brother Evan. My throat tightened like it always did when I remembered every birthday, graduation, and accolade that had been derailed by Evan's mysterious episodes, and the way my parents treated those episodes as holy writ. Before anyone shouts missing reasons, here's the highlight reel. When I was 8, I won a regional spelling bee. The photo in Mom's scrapbook doesn't show me holding the trophy. It shows Evan on the gym floor clutching his stomach while paramedics kneel beside him. Diagnosis: stress-induced gastritis. Except the ER discharged him 2 hours later with a note that read, "No abnormalities found." At 15, my sweet 16-1 party never hit the candle stage because Evan slumped to the carpet, moaning about an asthma attack, despite no wheezing on exam. Senior year, I gave the valedictory speech to rows of mostly empty metal chairs because Evan faked a seizure behind the bleachers as I approached the microphone. No metabolic irregularities, no postictal confusion, just another blank chart. Milestone for me equaled medical melodrama for Evan, and Mom called it coincidence while Dad called it unfortunate timing. I called it a pattern. Evan received endless grace. Every time he flopped dramatically to the floor, Mom stroked his hair like a Victorian heroine, whispering about how fragile he was. I spent evenings alone at home while they bounced from specialist to specialist. No condition ever stuck, but the narrative did. Evan was too delicate to face criticism, therefore my feelings could wait. Therapy later taught me the phrase enmeshed caretaker dynamic, but Reddit would probably call it blatant favoritism. Fast forward to my engagement. My partner Alex proposed during a hike, and we agreed our wedding would be small, 50 guests max, because we'd rather put money toward a house. As soon as Mom heard small, she claimed a third of the seats for relatives I'd spoken to twice in my life. She framed it as obligation. I saw it as an audience primed to fawn over Evan should the mood strike. The last straw landed 6 months before the ceremony. I sent a group text asking for mailing addresses. Mom replied that Evan's doctor recommended flexible accommodations, meaning an aisle seat, a quiet room nearby, and permission for him to leave mid-ceremony if symptoms flared. Dad suggested hiring a private nurse, just in case. Reading that message, I felt the old helpless rhythm of untouched birthday cakes. When I showed Alex the message chain from my parents, he didn't answer right away. He handed me a pad and said, "Write down everything you're afraid will happen if they're there." My list filled a page. EMTs, sobbing parents, shushed vows, me feeling like a guest at my own ceremony. Then he flipped to the next page and said, "Now write what happens if they stay home." That page bloomed with images, dancing, cake intact, a night that belonged to us. Seeing the columns side by side turned anxiety into clarity. I slammed the pen down and said, "They're off the list." He nodded like I'd chosen paint for the living room. No drama, just an easy decision we would honor. I didn't expect the backlash to be immediate. But Mom's phone call arrived before I could pour celebratory wine. She opened with crying, transitioned to guilt. Family is everything, and finished with threats to boycott. I told her that ship had sailed and hung up. Over the next week, I muted their numbers, blocked them on social media, and mailed invitations minus their names. Some cousins expressed shock. A few aunts texted passive-aggressive scripture verses. Therapy had armed me with the mute button. Our wedding day was flawless. Vows delivered without interruptions. First dance recorded in one continuous take. No ambulances, no fragile brother. For the first time since childhood, I was the main character in my own life. 1 month later, on a Sunday night thick with post-honeymoon chores, my phone buzzed. Evan's name filled the screen. Curiosity trumped caution. I answered. He sounded half sober, half sobbing. "I'm so sorry," he slurred. "You have to understand. I never meant to hurt you." I walked to the living room, hit speaker so Alex could hear, and said, "About what?" "All of it," Evan said. "The gastritis, the seizures, the migraines. None of it was real." Time dilated. I sat, knees weak, and stared at the phone like it might morph into a confession letter. Alex mouthed, "Record this." I tapped the app that saves calls as MP3s and watched the waveform spike as Evan kept talking. "Mom and Dad expected me to be perfect," he rambled. "If I was sick, expectations disappeared. I didn't have to compete with you because everyone forgot you." He hiccuped. "Once I realized they'd drop anything if I fainted, it just kept happening. It felt easier than failing." He claimed chronic victimhood, but every sentence felt like gasoline on old embers. I'd cried over missed firsts while he scored sympathy points. I let him talk for 30 minutes, offered non-committal uh-hus, and told him to sleep it off. Before hanging up, I asked, "Does Mom know?" He whispered, "No." "Promise you won't tell." I promised nothing. Part of me wanted to shove the recording into a digital black hole and move on. Revenge sounded childish. Then I remembered price tags. Therapy bills. Scholarships lost because my parents refused to co-sign loans during one of Evan's hospitalizations. And the wedding dress I paid for myself because Mom's savings were tied up in Evan's treatment fund. Anger crystallized into purpose. Initially, I secured evidence. I backed up the audio to multiple drives and transcribed it word for word. Then I verified the fraud. I requested hospital records under the pretext of family medical history. Most ER visits resulted in no findings, yet one incident triggered insurance payouts for unnecessary scans. Medical fraud? Check. Next came the reveal, with zero warning. Family tradition dictated a combined holiday dinner the first Saturday of December. Aunt Marlene hosted that year, neutral territory. I called her and asked if I could screen a short video after dessert as a surprise gift. She loves a spectacle and agreed instantly. Over the next week, Alex helped me splice phone audio with a slideshow of my overshadowed milestones. Photo of me at the spelling bee overlaid with ER discharge papers. Picture of me alone at graduation, next to an empty CT scan report. The final slide read, "Evan's confession, November 2nd, 8:17 p.m., followed by the recording." I worried about legal angles, so I confirmed two things. Recording a call is lawful in our state if one party consents, I did, and defamation requires false statements. I had truth on a hard drive. Morality checked, I burned the file to a USB shaped like a Christmas ornament. Petty? Absolutely. Cathartic? More. Dinner arrived. Alex and I drove up with store-bought pies because I wanted zero distractions. The dining room buzzed with chatter. Mom greeted me stiffly. Dad muttered a hello. Evan avoided eye contact. I smiled like the sun. After dishes were cleared, I tapped my glass. "I made something for the family," I said, holding up the ornament. Aunt Marlene dimmed lights. The first slide drew polite nods. By slide 3, Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. At the confession audio, Evan lunged for the projector, screaming my name, but Uncle Henry blocked him, thinking it part of the show. Evan's voice blared, "None of it was real." Gasps ricocheted. Mom's face drained. Dad whispered, "Oh, God." When the room's silence turned heavy enough to smother us, I pulled a manila envelope from my bag. "These are hospital records showing no diagnoses, yet thousands in insurance claims," I said. "I'm submitting them Monday." Mom finally spoke, voice quivering. "You blindsided us." I kept my tone steady. "I spent 25 years blindsided. This is me returning the favor." Evan tried an apology. I raised a hand. "Save it for the investigators." That night, Alex drove while I scrolled group chat implosions. Cousins denounced Evan's deceit. Aunts demanded accountability. Grandpa posted a single thumbs-up emoji. Possibly accidental, but I chose to feel supported. Mom sent paragraph after paragraph pleading family unity. I replied with a link to a therapist directory and muted her again. Revenge might have ended there, but consequences needed teeth, so I followed through. Monday morning, I filed a report with the Insurance Fraud Division, attaching the USB and transcripts. They thanked me politely. 3 weeks later, an investigator requested additional documentation. By January, Evan's insurance flagged over $40,000 in questionable claims. Next, scholarships. Evan had secured a private foundation grant in college by writing an essay about overcoming chronic illness. The foundation prides itself on integrity. I forwarded the confession with a concise timeline. They responded within a day. Funds obtained under false pretenses must be repaid. Word reached Evan's employer, a marketing firm that touts ethical branding. They don't love headline risk. HR opened a review. By February, Evan was no longer with the company. Throughout, Mom alternated between fury and bargaining. She accused me of destroying Evan's life. I reminded her he'd built it on lies. Dad tried neutrality until insurers contacted him for statements, given he'd signed guardianship forms when Evan was a minor. His lawyer advised cooperation, fracturing the parental front. Friends asked whether I felt guilty. I checked in with my therapist, expecting remorse. Strangely, I felt serene. I hadn't fabricated anything. I'd shone light on rot and let institutions handle cleanup. Still, I wanted symbolic restitution. I remembered the wedding dress invoice. $2,800 I shouldn't have borne alone. I filed a small claims suit against Evan for that amount, citing negligent infliction of emotional distress and associated costs. He could settle or face court, where the confession would resurface. His lawyer advised settlement. A cashier's check arrived 2 weeks before the hearing. I framed the deposit slip above my desk. Spring thawed into summer. Insurance negotiations wound on. Scholarship clawbacks progressed. I kept my distance. One humid evening, Mom showed up at my doorstep. Evan stood behind her, gaunt, eyes rimmed red. Alex opened the door, but didn't invite them inside. Mom launched into a speech about forgiveness, quoting scripture, insisting family bonds survive storms. I waited until she ran out of breath, then said, "This isn't a storm. Storms are natural. Evan forged this with intent. I choose safety over sentiment." I handed her a cease and desist drafted by a lawyer friend. Evan whispered, "I deserve another chance." I met his gaze for the first time since the call. "You've had hundreds," I said. He swallowed, stepped back, and towed Mom toward the car. Months passed. Alex and I bought a starter house, Walls painted a warm neutral that doesn't remind me of hospitals. Every so often I receive updates from investigators, restitution plans, mandatory counseling, ethics seminars. Each email feels like a stone lifting from my chest. Last week, a package arrived without a return label. Inside lay my old spelling bee trophy, engraving intact, wrapped in tissue. No note. I placed it on the shelf beside the framed deposit slip. Symbols of stolen childhood and reclaimed adulthood side by side. People online often end their stories with, "I don't know if I'm the a-hole," fishing for validation. I'm not casting that hook. I know exactly who I am. Someone who finally drew a boundary too solid to breach. Revenge didn't restore lost birthdays, but it halted the bleeding. If you're wondering whether I'll ever invite my family back into my life, the answer is no. Closure isn't a group project. Sometimes it's a locked door with you on one side and chaos on the other. I changed the locks and threw away the spare keys. Behind this door, the only episodes playing are the ones I choose to binge, popcorn in hand, no ambulances in sight. And if Evan wants attention now, he can take a number. Law enforcement already called dibs.